New York, 2061. Inside the 120-story glass tower of the Rutherford dynasty, a crystal plasma chandelier bathed the centennial gala of Etha dynamics in cold, dazzling light. Clara Wynne, a girl from the Appalachian Hills, sat at the long banquet table among senators, CEOs, and heirs in designer gowns. Her heart raced beneath a borrowed dress, but all she wanted was a quiet night at her boyfriend Damien Rutherford's side. Then Victor Rutherford, Damien's father and the ruthless CEO, let his voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Etha is a family that builds the future. And you, he paused, letting the silence drag. You're street garbage in a borrowed gown. The room froze. Champagne flutes trembled in midair. Cameras shifted toward Clara. Damien shot to his feet in fury, but before he could speak, Clara didn't cry, didn't flee. Instead, her eyes sharpened and a slow, deliberate smile touched her lips. Because in that single moment of public humiliation, Clara knew. This was the perfect moment to bring an empire to its knees. For a heartbeat, the gala remained silent. Guests shifted uncomfortably, crystal glasses clinking faintly against fine china. Victor Rutherford leaned back in his chair, savoring the humiliation he thought he'd inflicted. But Clara Wynne didn't flinch. She rose slowly, smoothing the midnight blue silk of her borrowed gown, and raised her glass of water as if to toast. "Street garbage," she repeated, her voice calm but carrying across the hall. "Interesting choice of words, Mr. Rutherford, because you've just made my decision very, very easy." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Damien's brow furrowed in alarm. Victor's smirk deepened. Clara set her glass down and drew a breath. "For the last 2 years, I've worked quietly as an environmental engineer by day and as an investigative journalist by night. And do you know which company's name came up in every single leak, every falsified report, every whispered bribe?" Her eyes locked on Victor's. "Etha Dynamics, your company, your signature." A visible crack appeared in Victor's mask of arrogance. He leaned forward sharply. "What game are you playing?" Clara didn't answer him. Instead, she tapped the sleek bracelet on her wrist. Instantly, the towering LED screens lining the gala walls flickered, and then lit up with a cascade of files, photos, and satellite images. Gasps filled the ballroom. There were memos stamped with Victor's digital seal, authorizing data adjustments. There were satellite images of toxic plumes bleeding from Etha facilities into protected forests. There were audio clips of executives laughing about buying off regulators. The Rutherford dynasty's secrets, laid bare before their most powerful allies. Damien's eyes widened as he realized the scale of what Clara had just unleashed. Guests began recording on their holophones, streaming live to millions. Victor shot to his feet, fury etched across his face. "Shut this down now," he barked at his staff, but it was too late. Clara stood taller, her voice steady against the chaos. "You called me garbage, but I am the reason the world will finally see what you've been hiding. Tonight, Mr. Rutherford, your empire collapses." The hall erupted. Panic, outrage, whispers, the thunder of a dynasty unraveling in real time. And at the center of it all stood Clara, no longer an outsider in a borrowed gown, but the woman who had just brought the most powerful man in America to his knees. The blinding light of the gala screens faded into Clara's memory. A different kind of light, the sickly orange glow of smokestacks above her childhood town in Appalachia. She was 12 the day she found her mother coughing blood on the front porch. The local mine had been leaking toxins into the water supply for years, but the company's report said everything was safe. By the time anyone admitted otherwise, dozens of families were sick. Clara's mother worked 3 jobs to keep them alive. Clara learned early, powerful men lied, and the poor paid the price. At 16, she fixed old generators in neighbors' barns just to pay for school books. At 20, she took a scholarship in environmental engineering, but the tuition never covered it all. Nights, she waited tables. Weekends, she pored over technical manuals, teaching herself how to read compliance reports the way other kids read novels. It was during one of those late nights that she met her mentor, a whistleblower-turned-journalist. He taught her the trade, how to chase paper trails, how to slip questions into casual interviews, how to protect sources. Evidence is the only weapon they can't twist, he told her. She never forgot it. Years later, working as a junior engineer in Boston, she stumbled across her first irregular data set, emission numbers that didn't match satellite readings. The name attached, Ether Dynamics. That's when Clara went underground. She bought second-hand drones, flying them over restricted zones. She hacked discarded data chips, piecing together deleted memos. She interviewed contract workers, janitors, maintenance crews, who'd seen toxic waste barrels dumped under cover of night. For 2 years, Clara built a vault of secrets. Every file she gathered was a small act of vengeance for the people back home who had died without answers. Then, by chance, she met Damien Rutherford, a man whose warmth didn't match his last name. He loved her without condescension, without agenda. For the first time, Clara questioned if she could keep carrying the truth. When she realized Damien's father was the man at the top of Ether, she begged her editor for time. "Give me 6 months," she said. "If I'm wrong about him, I'll bury the story." But the deeper she fell in love, the heavier her secret became. Every smile with Damien was shadowed by the files hidden in her encrypted drive. Every kiss felt like a betrayal, not of him, but of the truth. So when Victor Rutherford called her street garbage in front of the world, Clara's hesitation snapped. The girl who once fixed broken machines in a poisoned town stood in that crystal tower with nothing left to lose, and everything to expose. The Rutherford Centennial Gala had been choreographed to perfection. Every guest list vetted, every toast rehearsed, every camera angle planned. But Clara's broadcast shattered the illusion in seconds. On the towering holo screens, images of toxic plumes and forged reports looped on repeat. Senators gasped, investors muttered frantically into their comms, and journalists scrambled to capture every frame. Victor Rutherford slammed his fist against the table, sending crystal glasses shattering. "Cut the feed, shut it down." But no staff moved. Too many phones were already streaming live. The truth was viral. Damien stood frozen beside Clara, torn between fury at his father and shock at the woman he loved. "Clara, you knew. You had this the whole time." Clara turned to him, her voice quiet but steady. "I tried to protect you from it, but he just made sure I couldn't stay silent any longer." The silence that followed was broken by Elias Rutherford, the family patriarch, rising slowly from his chair at the head of the table. His voice carried the weight of 90 years. "Victor, I built Ether Dynamics with my own hands, and you've poisoned it for profit. This girl didn't shame us, you did." Gasps rippled through the room. Even Victor faltered, caught off guard by his father's condemnation. Helena Rutherford, Damien's mother, stood abruptly, her face pale with fury. "Enough of this circus. She's manipulating you, Damien. She's here to destroy us." But then Victoria, Damien's younger sister, spoke from across the table. "No, Mother. She's the first person in this house who's had the guts to tell the truth." The room descended into chaos. Board members whispering about emergency sessions. Senators slipping away before the scandal touched them. Investors selling stock live on their wrist pads. Victor's voice thundered above the noise. "You think this will end me, Clara Wynne? I am Ether Dynamics. Without me, this empire crumbles and thousands of jobs vanish. You'll have blood on your hands." Clara met his rage with calm steel. "The blood is already there, Mr. Rutherford, in the rivers you poisoned. in the lungs of families who trusted your promises. Tonight isn't the end, it's the beginning of accountability. Victor lunged forward, but Damien finally moved, stepping between them, his voice breaking with fury. "Father, stop! If anyone's destroyed this family, it's you." The gala dissolved into shouting, cameras flashing like lightning as security rushed to hold back Victor. And Clara, standing tall in her borrowed gown, realized this dinner had been meant to humiliate her, but it had become the trap that snapped shut on the Rutherfords themselves. By dawn, New York was no longer whispering about the Rutherford gala. It was screaming. Headlines blazed across every major network. Etha Dynamics environmental fraud exposed, CEO Victor Rutherford implicated. Clips from Clara's reveal looped endlessly, her calm voice against Victor's rage, the damning documents flooding the screens. Overnight, she went from the unknown girlfriend to the whistleblower who toppled an empire. Within hours, Etha Dynamics stock plunged 40%. The Department of Justice announced a joint probe with the EPA into falsified compliance reports. International regulators suspended Etha contracts pending investigation. Investors scrambled, billions evaporating in a single morning. At a press conference, board members tried to distance themselves from Victor, citing rogue executive misconduct. But Clara's files showed signatures across entire chains of command. The rot ran deeper than one man. In Boston, Clara's apartment became a war room. Her editor at the Sentinel called nonstop, praising her courage, offering her a permanent position. Other outlets begged for exclusives. Her phone buzzed with job offers, speaking invitations, even a book deal. But Clara felt hollow. Every congratulatory message reminded her of Damien's face the night before, the hurt in his eyes when he asked, "You knew." Meanwhile, the Rutherford family fractured. Victor barricaded himself with lawyers, swearing vengeance. Helena defended her husband in public, decrying Clara as a manipulator. Victoria, emboldened, publicly stated, "If Etha survives, it must be rebuilt with integrity." Elias, the founder, summoned the board for an emergency takeover, stripping Victor of authority pending trial. And Damien, he vanished. No statements, no sightings. For 3 long days, Clara heard nothing. She returned to her day job at the engineering firm, desperate for normalcy, only to find colleagues staring at her like she was a ghost walking out of their news feeds. When she pulled on her safety gloves that morning, one coworker whispered, "She's the one who took down Rutherford." Clara buried herself in work, but her hands shook. The victory she had fought for her whole life felt like ashes in her mouth. Late that night, her sister called. "You did it, Clara. You stood up to the man who thought he owned the future." Clara stared out at the city skyline, glowing with chaos. "Then why does it feel like I lost the only future I wanted?" 3 nights after the gala, a knock echoed on Clara's apartment door. When she opened it, Damien Rutherford stood there, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled like he hadn't slept. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them carried the weight of betrayal, grief, and love all at once. "Hi," he said finally. "Hi," Clara whispered, her throat dry. He stepped inside, scanning her tiny apartment, the cracked plaster walls, the second-hand couch, the desk stacked with files. This was the world she'd chosen to live in, and the world she had just burned his family with. They both blurted out at once. "I should have told you," then stopped. The ghost of a smile tugged at Damien's lips. "Ladies first." Clara's chest ached. "I should have told you about the investigation. I thought I was protecting you, but the truth, I was afraid. Afraid if you knew, you'd see me as an enemy and I'd lose you." Damien's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "And I should have called you sooner. I spent 3 days sifting through evidence, confronting my father, listening to lawyers spin excuses, and in the end, he looked at her with broken eyes. It was all true, Clara, Every word you said, he did it, worse than we imagined. Clara reached for him, but he pulled back, the distance between them sharper than any blade. Do you know what it felt like? Damien's voice cracked. To watch the woman I love destroy my family in front of the entire world, and then realize she was right. Tears burned Clara's eyes. I never wanted to destroy you, Damien. Only him, only the lies. He turned away, pacing, torn in two. My mother hasn't spoken to me since. My father calls me a traitor. Half the board wants my head, and in the middle of it all, there's you, the only person who ever made me feel free, but also the one who lit the match. Clara's voice trembled. So what are you saying, that we're done? Damien stopped pacing. Slowly, he crossed the room and took both her hands in his. His voice was raw, but steady. I'm saying I love you, that hasn't changed, but love built on secrets can't survive. If we're going to have a future, it has to be rebuilt from the ground up, with nothing hidden ever again. Clara searched his face, the man who had stood between her and his father's fury, the man she feared losing more than anything. She nodded through tears. Then let's start over. No secrets, no lies, just the truth. Damien exhaled shakily, finally pulling her into his arms. But the embrace wasn't the fairy tale kind. It was tight, fragile, a lifeline in the middle of a storm. Because both of them knew love could survive betrayal, but only if they had the courage to rebuild. 6 months later, the name Rutherford no longer commanded reverence on Wall Street, it commanded subpoenas. Victor Rutherford was indicted on federal charges of fraud, bribery, and environmental crimes. Court dates replaced boardrooms, and his empire shrank with every passing week. Helena, once the image of poise, stood grim-faced beside him at hearings, her silence mistaken for loyalty, her dignity long since stripped away. But amid the wreckage, new things began to grow. Clara Wynne no longer balanced two lives. She became the voice of corporate accountability. Her byline led national headlines. Her testimony before Congress forced sweeping reforms in environmental oversight. She started a series in the Sentinel called The Human Cost, telling the stories of families poisoned, workers silenced, and communities abandoned by greed. She refused to let the scandal just be about numbers. She gave it faces, names, consequences. Damien Rutherford walked away from the smoking ruins of his inheritance. With what remained of his savings, he launched the Aurora Foundation, hiring displaced ETHA employees and funding renewable projects in the very communities his family had harmed. I can't undo the damage, he told reporters, but I can help build something honest in its place. And slowly, painfully, his bond with Clara deepened again. Their relationship wasn't fairy tale perfect. It was scarred, patched, rebuilt from broken trust. But the scars became part of its strength. On a gray November morning, Clara returned to Appalachia with Damien at her side. They stood by the rusting remains of the mine that had poisoned her childhood town. Children played nearby on a field her foundation grants had cleaned and restored. For the first time in decades, the water ran clear. Clara looked at Damien. This is why I fought, not to tear down your family, to give people like mine a chance to live. Damien took her hand, squeezing it firmly. Then we'll keep fighting. Together. For them, for us. In that moment, Clara realized something profound. Victor had tried to strip her of dignity by calling her garbage. Instead, his cruelty had forged her resolve, given her a voice, and pulled Damien out from under his shadow. The empire of lies had fallen, but from its ashes, something better had begun. A year after the night she was called street garbage in a borrowed gown, Clara Wynne stood on the rooftop of the Aurora Foundation's new headquarters, overlooking the Hudson River at dawn. The skyline shimmered with neon towers, but the river itself, once choked with runoff, now reflected the morning light, clear and alive again. Beside her, Damien slipped his hand into hers. No gala, No chandeliers, just the quiet rhythm of a city learning to breathe cleaner air. Clara closed her eyes, letting the wind rush against her face. "Sometimes," she whispered, "you have to be thrown away to realize you're not trash at all. You're gold forged in fire, unbreakable." The first rays of sunlight cut through the mist, gilding the water below. And as the world slowly woke, Clara smiled, not because the fight was over, but because she finally knew who she was. Not garbage, not borrowed, but the woman who turned humiliation into rebirth and made the empire of lies crumble into dust, fade to black,